The transmission crackled through every council receiver at once, breaking protocol and bypassing security screens. Rena heard it while filing reports in the diplomatic archives, her four hands freezing mid-motion as the voice filled the chamber. It spoke in Halcyon, a language she barely understood, but the translation matrix made the meaning horribly clear. This is Elder Tomas of the Halcyon mining colony on Frontier World 7. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. They came from nowhere. They're taking our children. Please, someone. Anyone. They're taking our children. The transmission cut to static, then silence. Rena dropped her datapad and ran toward the council chamber, her leg joints clicking rapidly against the polished floor. By the time she arrived, the senior members had already gathered in their floating seats, their faces showing every shade of concern her translator could identify. The Halcyons were scholars, miners, artists who turned asteroids into sculptures that could be seen from orbit. They had no weapons, no military, no way to defend themselves against whatever had found them. Council Member Braun, a massive creature whose species had evolved in high gravity, spoke first. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. We all heard the call. The question is what we do about it. The nearest defense fleet is 4 months away, another member said, her crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into worried patterns. By the time we arrive, there will be nothing left to save. We could send the emergency response units from Sector 9, Braun suggested, though his tone carried no hope. They could arrive in 6 weeks if they push their engines to maximum. 6 weeks, Rena whispered, though she had not meant to speak aloud. Every head turned toward her. Junior diplomats did not interrupt council sessions. Junior diplomats especially did not speak without permission. But the words kept coming, pushed by something desperate in her chest. Elder Tomas said they were taking children. In 6 weeks, those children will be gone. In 6 weeks, everyone will be gone. Braun's eyes, each the size of Rena's head, fixed on her. Then what do you suggest, junior diplomat? The answer came to her lips before she could stop it. Call the humans. The chamber exploded into noise. Voices overlapped in a dozen languages, the translation matrix struggling to keep pace. Rena caught fragments. Dangerous. Unstable. Deathworlders. Warmongers. The humans had been admitted to the council only 3 cycles ago, and the debate still raged about whether that had been a mistake. Absolutely not, the crystalline member said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade through water. The humans are barely civilized. Their entire planet is a nightmare of predators, diseases, and natural disasters. They evolved learning to kill everything around them. We cannot unleash them on a situation we do not fully understand. They haven't broken a single treaty since joining, Rena argued, her voice stronger now despite her fear. They followed every rule, respected every boundary. Because we've kept them on a short leash, Braun said. Their military capabilities are unknown. Their weapons technology is classified, even from us. Do you know why? Because in their first contact war with the Vren Collective, they destroyed a battle fleet that had conquered 40 systems. They did it in less than a day. Rena had heard the stories. Everyone had. The Vren had attacked a human colony world, expecting easy conquest. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that treated warfare like other species treated breathing. Natural, instinctive, terrifyingly efficient. The Vren still refused to discuss what happened in those final hours before their admiral surrendered unconditionally. That's exactly why we should call them, Rena said quietly. The Halcyons need someone who knows how to fight. We can debate philosophy and proper procedure while children are being stolen, or we can ask for help from the only species that might arrive in time. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush her. Braun exchanged looks with the other senior members, having entire conversations and glances that Rena could not follow. Finally, he turned back to her. You understand what you're asking? If we call the humans, if we give them a military target, we might be showing them how easy it would be to dominate the galaxy. We might be handing them an excuse to do what we've all feared since they arrived. Or, Rena said, meeting his enormous eyes without flinching, we might be saving innocent people who have no one else to save them. Another long silence. Then Braun's hand moved to his communication panel. Draft the message. Mark it urgent priority. Send it on all human frequencies. Rena moved to the communication station with hands that shook so badly she nearly dropped the input stylus. She kept the message simple. Distress call from peaceful species under attack by hostile force. Immediate assistance required. Location attached. She stared at the final line for a long moment before adding it. Please help them. The message transmitted. The council chamber fell quiet, everyone watching the communication array as if they could see the signal racing through space toward human territory. Rena checked the chronometer. If the humans responded at all, it would take hours just for the signal to reach them. Then hours more for any reply. Then days or weeks to mobilize a response force. The reply came in 11 minutes. Rena stared at the incoming transmission marker, certain she had misread it. 11 minutes. That was impossible. The signal had barely had time to reach the nearest human outpost, let alone receive a response from any authority capable of military decisions. She opened the channel with trembling hands. The voice that emerged spoke perfect council standard, calm, and absolutely certain. This is Captain Rivers of the United Human Naval Ship Defiant. We received your distress call regarding the Halcyon colony. We're already on our way. Current ETA is 14 hours. Tell them to hold position. Tell them help is coming. Defiant out. The transmission ended. The council chamber remained silent. 14 hours. The humans were 14 hours away from a frontier world that should have taken them weeks to reach, which meant they were already close, already positioned, already ready. Braun looked at Rena with an expression she could not read. What have we done? Rena had no answer. She could only watch the chronometer and count down the hours until they found out. Elder Tomas pressed his face against the observation window of the shelter, watching the sky tear itself apart. The children huddled behind him in the reinforced basement had finally stopped crying, though whether from exhaustion or shock he could not tell. Above them, through 3 meters of rock and metal, the sounds of the attack continued. Explosions, weapons fire, screams that cut off too quickly. The Ravagers had come from nowhere, their ships blocking out the stars like a swarm of insects. They did not negotiate, did not make demands. They simply began taking people, dragging them toward their vessels with mechanical arms that did not care how tightly families held onto each other. Tomas had seen his daughter pulled from his arms 6 hours ago. He had not heard from her since. The distress call he sent had been an act of desperation. The council would send help eventually, but eventually meant nothing to people being harvested like crops. He had not expected an answer. He certainly had not expected the answer that came. Now he watched reality break open. The space above the colony fractured, reality peeling back like skin from a wound. Light poured through the tiers, harsh and white, and utterly foreign to anything Tomas had ever seen. Then the ships emerged. They came in formation, moving with a precision that made Tomas's breath catch. 300 vessels of varying sizes, each one angular and aggressive in ways that made council ships look soft by comparison. They did not drift into position. They arrived exactly where they intended, already oriented toward threats, already moving with purpose. The largest ship, a massive thing bristling with weapons that Tomas could not even identify, positioned itself directly above the colony. A communication channel opened, flooding every receiver in the shelter. Halcyon Colony, this is Captain Rivers of the UHNS Defiant. We're here to help. Please respond if you can hear this. Tomas lunged for the communication panel, his hands shaking so badly he nearly missed the activation button. This is Elder Tomas. We hear you. They're everywhere. They're taking our people. Please, my daughter is out there somewhere. We see them, Elder Tomas. The voice remained calm, almost gentle, despite the chaos visible through the window. We're going to get your people back. I need you to keep everyone in the shelters. Do not come out until we give the all clear. Can you do that for me? Yes. Yes, we'll stay hidden. Good. Stay safe. We'll handle this. The channel closed. Tomas watched through the window as the human fleet moved into action. The Ravager scout ships noticed the newcomers and turned to investigate, moving in the aggressive patterns that had overwhelmed every defense the Halcyons tried. 12 of them broke from the main swarm, accelerating toward a single human destroyer that had positioned itself away from the fleet. Tomas counted to 90 in that time. All 12 Ravager ships ceased to exist. The human destroyer had not even changed course. Weapons fire came from points along its hull that Tomas had not noticed, moving too fast for his eyes to track. The Ravager ships simply came apart, their debris scattering into the void while the destroyer continued on its patrol pattern as if nothing had happened. A Council observer ship that had been hiding in the system's outer reaches moved closer, its sensors undoubtedly recording everything. Tomas wondered what they were thinking as they watched the human ships move. Each vessel knew exactly where the others were, adjusting position in perfect coordination without apparent communication. They moved like a school of fish, like a flock of birds, like a single organism with 300 bodies. The main Ravager force began to arrive, their numbers darkening the sky. Tomas felt his heart sink as he counted them. Hundreds, no thousands. The human fleet was outnumbered nearly 7-1, and the Ravagers were already moving to surround them. The human response was immediate and terrible. Weapons fire lit up the darkness like a new sun being born. The humans did not retreat, did not even slow down. They moved into the Ravager formation like a blade, sliding into flesh, their weapons cutting through hulls that had shrugged off everything the Halcyons owned. Tomas watched a human cruiser destroy 6 Ravager ships in the time it took him to draw breath. But some Ravager ships broke through the defensive fire, latching onto human vessels with boarding tubes. Tomas had seen what the Ravagers did to ships they boarded. The crews never survived. Boarding a ship was a death sentence, a guaranteed loss that meant abandoning the vessel and fleeing in escape pods. The human ships did not abandon, did not flee. Through the communication channels left open, Tomas heard the sounds of fighting inside those ships. Weapons fire, shouting in that strange human language. Then silence. Then the boarding tubes detaching, blown clear by explosive charges. The Ravager boarding parties ejected back into space, but a smaller screen in the shelter showed sensor data, and Tomas watched it update in real time. The human casualties read 3%. 3%. Against an enemy that outnumbered them 7-1, the humans were losing 3 ships out of every 100 while the Ravagers were dying in groups. Through the window, Tomas saw something that made his breath stop. Human shuttles, smaller craft that had detached from the main fleet, were flying through the battle toward the surface, toward the colony, toward the buildings where the Ravagers had taken their captives. The shuttles landed under fire, their shields glowing as they absorbed impacts that should have destroyed them. Hatches opened. Armored figures emerged, moving with that same terrible precision the ships had shown. They were human, but barely recognizable in armor that made them look twice their natural size. The Ravagers turned to meet them. Tomas closed his eyes, unable to watch what he was certain would be a massacre. When he opened them again, the Ravagers were retreating. The humans were advancing, weapons cutting through the enemy with an efficiency that seemed impossible. And behind them, being ushered toward the shuttles with careful hands, were Halcyons, his people. Rescued. On the screen, a new notification appeared. The Ravager fleet was breaking off, those ships still capable of movement turning to flee. The humans pursued without mercy, destroying every ship that did not surrender fast enough. Tomas sank to his knees as the shelter door opened and his daughter walked through it, supported by a human in armor that still bore scorch marks from the battle. The human's voice came through speakers in the helmet, translated automatically. Elder Tomas, I believe this belongs to you. The Council observer ship maintained position at the system's edge, its sensors recording every moment of the battle with the kind of detail that would be analyzed for years to come. Inside, Observer Kellis watched the tactical display with all 4 of her eyes, unable to look away even when the data became too disturbing to process comfortably. The humans were winning. Not just winning, but dominating a battle against an enemy that had destroyed colonies across 3 sectors. The Ravagers had never faced organized resistance before, had never needed to. Their tactics relied on overwhelming numbers and the simple fact that most species valued survival over victory. They would swarm, absorb losses, and eventually break through any defense through sheer persistence. The humans were not most species. Kellis watched a human battleship turn directly into a formation of 60 Ravager attack craft, weapons blazing from every visible port. The Ravager ships, scattered, tried to surround the battleship and attack from multiple angles. It was the standard tactic, one that had worked against every opponent they had ever faced. The battleship spun on its axis, maintaining fire in a complete circle while simultaneously accelerating toward the planet. 32 Ravager ships died in the following 20 seconds. The rest broke off their attack and fled, only to run into a patrol of human fighters that had moved to cut off that exact escape route. The humans were not reacting to Ravager tactics. They were predicting them, countering them before they even fully developed. Kellis had studied warfare for 300 cycles, had observed dozens of conflicts across the galaxy, and she had never seen anything like this. That a priority alert drew her attention to a section of the battlefield where several Ravager ships had broken through the human perimeter and were diving toward the colony surface. Kellis felt her circulatory system pulse faster. If those ships reached the civilian centers, the casualties would be catastrophic. 3 human destroyers peeled away from the main battle, their engines burning at what had to be dangerous levels as they accelerated after the Ravager ships. Kellis ran the calculations. The humans would not intercept in time. The Ravagers would reach the surface with at least 40 seconds to spare, plenty of time to deploy their harvesting equipment and grab more victims. Then one of the human destroyers did something Kellis had never seen before. It rotated completely backward while still moving forward, presenting its main weapons toward the Ravager ships behind it while maintaining its pursuit course. The weapons fired in a pattern that looked random until Kellis saw the results. Every shot missed. Every single one. Then the Ravager ships exploded anyway, flying directly into the weapons fire that the human ship had placed exactly where they would be 3 seconds later. The destroyer had not been shooting at where the Ravagers were. It had been shooting at where they were going to be. Impossible, Kellis whispered, though there was no one to hear her in the observation ship. The calculations required to predict that movement pattern, accounting for evasive maneuvers and velocity changes, would require processing power beyond any organic mind. Yet the humans had done it. Were still doing it. Every human ship in the battle space moved with that same preternatural awareness of where enemies would be before they arrived. It was not just training or technology. It was something else. Something that made Kellis's research tentacles curl with concern. She switched her sensor focus to one of the boarded human ships, where Ravager boarding parties had forced entry through hull breaches. Standard doctrine called for the crew to evacuate to secure sections and vent the compromised areas to space. The humans were not following standard doctrine. Audio feeds from the human ship crackled through her speakers, the translation matrix working to convert human combat language into something understandable. What Kellis heard made her question everything she thought she knew about ground combat. The humans were not defending. They were hunting. Through internal sensors, Kellis watched armored human soldiers move through their own ship with the same terrible efficiency their vessels showed in space. They did not wait for the Ravagers to attack. They moved to intercept, cutting off retreat paths, coordinating without apparent communication to trap Ravager soldiers in crossfires that left no survivors. A Ravager boarding party of 40 soldiers encountered a human defensive position held by 8 Marines. The Ravagers charged, relying on their superior numbers and biological weapons that had broken through every defense they had encountered before. 70 seconds later, all 40 Ravagers were dead. The 8 humans had lost no one. Kellis watched the human Marines check each fallen Ravager for signs of life, their movements professional and thorough. When they found one still breathing, they did not finish it. Instead, they called for medical support and began administering first aid with the same efficiency they had shown in combat. They heal as well as they harm, Kellis recorded in her observation log. They kill without hesitation, then save without question. I do not understand this species. The main battle was ending now. The Ravager forces reduced to scattered ships, fleeing in every direction. The human fleet pursued with relentless determination, weapons fire chasing down every enemy vessel that did not immediately surrender. Those that did surrender, that broadcast their capitulation on all frequencies, were allowed to power down their weapons and were taken into custody by human ships. Kellis counted the final casualties. The Ravagers had arrived with 2,300 ships. 1,872 were destroyed. 391 surrendered. Only 37 escaped. The human losses were 114 ships damaged, 9 ships destroyed, and according to the data stream the humans were broadcasting openly, 2,314 personnel killed in action, 2,000 lives. The humans had lost 2,000 of their own people and were broadcasting those numbers as if they were acceptable casualties. As if losing thousands was simply the cost of responding to a distress call from a species they barely knew. Kellis filed her preliminary report and marked it with the highest priority classification. The Council needed to see this, needed to understand what they had unleashed by calling the humans, needed to decide what it meant that humanity's response to hearing about stolen children was to send 300 warships and accept thousands of their own deaths to stop it. The communication panel blinked with an incoming hail from the human flagship. Kellis accepted it, and Captain Rivers appeared on her screen, looking tired but composed. Observer Kellis, I'm Captain Rivers. I wanted to thank you for maintaining position during the battle. Your presence helped document what happened here today, which will be important for the Council to understand our actions. Captain, I have documented everything. The Council will see what your fleet accomplished. Rivers nodded slowly. What we accomplished was keeping our promise to people who asked for help. Everything else is just details. 3 days after the battle, Elder Tomas walked through the rebuilt sections of the colony with a human engineer named Amy, watching as construction crews worked to repair the damage. The crews were mixed now, humans and Halcyons working side by side, though the humans did most of the heavy lifting with equipment that made the work move at impossible speeds. You're staring again, Amy said, not unkindly. She was young for a human, her face unlined despite the horrors she must have witnessed in the battle. Her armor was gone now, replaced with simple work clothes that bore the insignia of the Human Engineering Corps. I apologize, Tomas said, looking away from where a human was lifting a support beam that should have required 6 Halcyons to move. I'm trying to understand your species. You came here as warriors. Now you rebuild as if that is equally natural to you. Amy shrugged, a gesture Tomas had learned meant casual acceptance. War and construction use a lot of the same skills. Planning, logistics, teamwork. We're just applying them to a different problem. But you lost thousands of your people 3 days ago. I saw the casualty reports. 2,314 deaths. How are you here working instead of mourning? Something crossed Amy's face then, something that made Tomas regret his question. She set down the scanning equipment she had been holding and looked out over the colony, her eyes distant. We are mourning, every single one of us. But we mourn by making sure those deaths meant something, by making sure the people we saved get to live good lives in a rebuilt home. Grief comes later in quiet moments. Right now, there's work to do. She led him toward a section of the colony that had been completely destroyed, where human construction drones were printing new buildings from raw materials. Can I show you something? Tomas nodded, and Amy pulled up a holographic display from her wrist device. It showed a wall covered in names, so many names that Tomas could not count them all. This is the memorial wall on the Defiant. Every human military ship has one. These are people from our species who died in wars throughout our history. Not just the recent ones. All of them, going back 200,000 years. The number was staggering. Tomas stepped closer to the hologram, reading names in dozens of languages from conflict he had never heard of. Wars between human nations. Civil wars. Rebellions. Revolutions. The list seemed endless. We've been fighting since before we had written language, Amy continued quietly. Fighting each other, mostly. Over territory, resources, ideas, religions, skin color, who loved who. We got very, very good at killing. It's in our nature, evolved into us from millions of years of surviving on a planet that was actively trying to kill us every single day. Then why did you come here? Why risk so much for people you don't know? Amy turned off the hologram and met his eyes. Because we learned something important in the last few centuries. Being good at violence doesn't mean we have to be violent. Having the capacity to harm doesn't mean we should use it. We spent 200,000 years learning to fight. We spent the last 100 learning what's worth fighting for. She gestured toward the colony, toward the Halcyons working alongside humans. This is worth fighting for. People who never hurt anyone, who just wanted to study rocks and make art and raise their children. When we heard your distress call, when we heard that someone was taking children, there was no debate, no discussion. We came because that's what you do when someone needs help and you can provide it. Tomas felt his throat tighten. But the cost. Your people who died, they knew the cost when they enlisted. Every human in that fleet volunteered to be there, knowing that responding to distress calls means sometimes you don't come home. We accept that because the alternative is worse. What alternative? Being the ones who heard a cry for help and did nothing. They walked in silence for a while, Tomas processing what he had learned. A human soldier approached, still wearing combat armor that bore fresh repair marks. She saluted Amy, who returned the gesture with casual familiarity. Elder Tomas, this is Lieutenant Harris. She led the team that found her daughter. Tomas looked at the human warrior who had saved his child. Thank you. I have not had the chance to tell you. Thank you for bringing her back to me. Harris's face softened behind her helmet's transparent faceplate. No thanks needed, Elder. That's the job. How is she doing? Better. The medical staff said she will recover fully. Tomas hesitated, then asked the question that had been haunting him. What happened to the Ravagers who took her? The ones your team found. We captured them, Harris said simply. They're being held on the Defiant, awaiting trial for war crimes. Some are wounded in the fighting. Our doctors are treating them. You're healing them? After what they did? Yes, sir. Our rules of engagement are very clear. Once an enemy surrenders or is rendered unable to fight, they become prisoners and are afforded all the protections that status requires. That includes medical care. Tomas stared at her. I do not understand. You killed thousands of them without hesitation during the battle. During the battle, they were enemy combatants threatening civilians. Now they're prisoners. The circumstances changed, so our response changed. It's not complicated, but it was complicated. Tomas could see that even if the humans could not, they had created an entire philosophy around violence, complete with rules and limitations and moral boundaries that they followed even when it would be easier not to. They were not mindless warriors. They were guardians who had learned to be precise with their force, to know exactly when to use it and when to show mercy. Captain Rivers joined them then, his uniform clean despite the chaos of the previous days. Elder Tomas, I wanted to inform you that we'll be maintaining a defensive perimeter around your colony for the next 6 months, just until Council forces can arrive to take over security. 6 months? You're staying for 6 months? We're not leaving you undefended. The Ravagers might come back, and if they do, we'll be here to stop them again. Tomas looked around at the humans working to rebuild his home, at the warships maintaining protective orbits overhead, at the warriors who had become builders and the killers who had become healers. He thought about the 2,314 humans who had died to save people they had never met. Why? He asked quietly. Why do all of this? Captain Rivers smiled, and it was not the smile of a warrior or a commander. It was the smile of someone who had found purpose in protecting others. Because you needed help. That's all the reason we've ever needed. The Galactic Council chamber had not been this full in decades. Every member species sent representatives, packing the floating seats until the chamber's environmental systems struggled to accommodate the different atmospheric requirements. Rena stood in the junior diplomat section, watching as the senior members argued about what to do with humanity. Observer Kellis presented her report first, her 4 eyes scanning the assembled representatives as the holographic display showed footage from the Battle of Halcyon's Edge. The Council watched in silence as human ships tore through Ravager formations with surgical precision. Several members looked away when the casualty counts appeared. 2,314 human deaths, Kellis said, her voice steady despite the weight of those numbers. They absorbed these losses to save a colony of 73,000 Halcyons. Their casualty ratio was 1 human death for every 32 civilians saved. Council member Braun leaned forward in his seat, his massive frame making the hovering platform creak. Those casualty numbers are unacceptable. No species should be willing to sacrifice so many for strangers. And yet they did, Kellis replied. Furthermore, my investigation reveals this was not an isolated incident. The humans have been quietly responding to distress calls across the galaxy for the past 2 years. I have documented 47 separate interventions where human forces provided aid, security, or rescue services without requesting payment or territorial concessions. The chamber erupted into noise. 47 interventions that the Council had known nothing about. 47 times humanity had deployed military assets across galactic space, and the Council's intelligence services had failed to notice until now that a representative from the Vren Collective, the species humanity had defeated in their first contact war, stood to speak. His voice carried the weight of experience. The Council must understand what we learned too late. Humans do not fight like other species. They do not fight to conquer or to gain resources. They fight to protect. But that makes them more dangerous, not less. A species that will die by the thousands for strangers is a species that cannot be reasoned with using conventional diplomatic pressure. Are you suggesting we should restrict their movements? Another member asked. Place observers on human ships? Limit their military capabilities? I am suggesting that we tried that approach with the Vren Collective, and it ended with our battle fleet destroyed and our admiral begging for mercy. The humans could have taken our territory, could have demanded reparations. Instead, they offered us medical aid and helped rebuild the colony we attacked. I do not understand them, but I know that treating them as a threat when they have only acted as protectors would be a catastrophic mistake. Rena felt something shift in the chamber's mood. The Vren were feared warriors, species who had built an empire on conquest. Hearing their representatives speak of humans with such careful respect changed calculations across the council. Braun called for order, his voice rumbling through the space. We need to make a decision. Do we accept humanity as an equal member of the council, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails? Or do we place restrictions on their military activities to ensure galactic security? Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. Elder Tomas walked in, flanked by 2 human guards in dress uniforms who took positions by the entrance. He moved to the center of the chamber, and Renan noticed he was not alone. Behind him came representatives from dozens of other species, each one wearing the insignia of a colony or settlement that had been saved by human intervention. I am Elder Tomas of the Halcyon Colony. 3 days ago, my people were being harvested by ravagers while the council debated response times and proper procedures. I sent a distress call hoping anyone, would hear in time to matter. The humans answered in 14 hours and lost thousands of their own people to save us. He activated a holographic projector, and the display showed a human memorial service. Rows upon rows of flag-draped caskets being loaded onto transport ships. Human military personnel standing at attention, their faces wet with tears they did not bother to hide. These are the humans you debate restricting. These are the warriors you fear. I watched them cry for their fallen, then return to rebuilding my colony the same day. I watched them treat captured ravagers in their medical bays while their own wounded waited for care. I watched them refuse payment, refuse thanks, refuse everything except the chance to help more people who might need them. Another representative stepped forward, a small creature whose species Rena did not immediately recognize. I am from the Outer Rim mining platform Delta 7. Pirates attacked our facility 6 months ago. The council sent observers. The humans sent marines. Our entire population of 400 was rescued without a single civilian casualty. The humans left the same day, refusing our offer of payment. We did not know their names. We did not know how to thank them. We only knew that when we called for help, they came. More representatives spoke, each one telling similar stories. Humans arriving in impossible time frames. Humans taking casualties to protect civilians. Humans leaving without demanding anything in return. The pattern was undeniable. Ambassador Wilson, humanity's representative to the Council, finally stood to speak. He was older, his hair gray, and his face lined with years of diplomatic service. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the aggressive confidence some expected from a species of warriors. The Council is right to be concerned about our military capabilities. We are very good at violence because our history taught us to be. But that same history taught us something else. It taught us that power without purpose is just destruction, that strength without compassion is just tyranny, that the ability to harm means nothing if you don't also develop the wisdom to know when not to use it. He gestured toward the representatives who had spoken. These people called for help. We answered. That's all we've ever wanted to do. We're not asking for special treatment or expanded territory. We're asking to be allowed to continue doing what we're already doing, responding to distress calls, protecting those who cannot protect themselves, being the help that arrives in time to matter. The vote happened in silence, each council member weighing the evidence, the testimony, the undeniable pattern of human behavior over the past 2 years. When the results appeared on the central display, Rena felt her heart's beat faster. The motion to restrict human military activities, defeated. The motion to grant humanity full council membership with recognition as guardians of galactic peace, approved. Ambassador Wilson bowed his head. Thank you. We won't let you down. Braun's expression was unreadable. See that you don't. The galaxy is watching now. 6 months after the council vote, the Joint Station Unity Watch hung in neutral space between 3 major trade routes, its rotating sections housing personnel from 40 different species. Captain Rivers walked through the command center, nodding to officers from a dozen worlds who now coordinated with human forces to respond to threats across the galaxy. The integration had not been easy. Some species still feared human military power. Others questioned whether humanity could maintain its protective stance without eventually demanding control. But the pattern continued. Distress calls answered. Pirates deterred. Raiders stopped. And always, humans taking casualties to minimize harm to others. Rivers stopped at the main tactical display, where his new operations officer, a Vren named Kelvin, was reviewing incoming reports. The Vren had volunteered for the position specifically to understand how humans conducted warfare. What he found had changed his entire perspective. "Captain, we have a situation," Kelvin said, his voice carrying the careful respect he had developed for human protocols. Unknown distress signal from the frontier gamma sector. New species, no previous contact with Council or human forces. They're under attack by what looks like a slaver fleet. Rivers moved to review the data, his experienced eyes parsing the tactical information quickly. The species calling for help had no knowledge of the greater galaxy, no idea that anyone would hear them or respond. They just screamed into the void and hoped. How long to get there? 16 hours at maximum fleet speed. Council forces are 48 hours away. Rivers activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Captain Rivers. We have a distress call from an unknown species under attack by slavers. I know we just finished patrol rotation, and many of you are tired. I know some of you have families waiting, but there are people out there who need help right now. I'm taking the Defiant. Anyone who wants to join me, fall into formation. Anyone who needs to stand down, no judgment. You've all earned rest. He closed the channel and waited. On the tactical display, ship icons began moving toward the Defiant's position. Not just human ships, Halcyon medical frigates, Vren destroyers, ships from a dozen species, their crews volunteering to fly into danger for people they had never met. Tomas appeared on the communication screen, his face showing the marks of age but also purpose. He had joined the Halcyon military specifically to serve aboard human vessels, bringing his people's medical expertise to support rescue operations. Elder Tomas, you don't have to come. Your medical teams have been working nonstop for weeks. Captain, a wise human once told me that grief comes later in quiet moments. Right now, there's work to do. We're ready. The fleet assembled quickly. 200 human ships, 50 allied vessels. Not the overwhelming force that had saved the Halcyon colony, but more than enough to stop slavers who expected no resistance. They jumped to faster-than-light travel together, moving as the coordinated force they had trained to become 16 hours later. They emerged in the frontier Gamma sector to find a battle already in progress. The unknown species, insectoid creatures with beautiful crystalline wings, were trying to defend their home with primitive rockets and ballistic weapons. The slavers were toying with them, destroying their defenses piece by piece before moving in to capture survivors. Rivers opened all communication channels, broadcasting on every frequency. Slaver fleet, this is Captain Rivers of the United Human Naval Ship Defiant, operating under Galactic Council authority as Guardian Forces. You're ordered to cease hostile actions immediately and surrender for processing. This is your only warning. The response came in the form of weapons fire directed at the human fleet. The slavers had clearly not heard about what happened at Halcyon's Edge. They learned quickly. The battle lasted 43 minutes. The slaver fleet, accustomed to preying on defenseless targets, broke apart under coordinated fire from ships that had trained for this exact scenario. When the last slaver vessel powered down its weapons in surrender, the unknown species was left staring at the fleet that had appeared from nowhere to save them. Rivers led the first contact team personally, taking translators and diplomats from multiple species. The insectoid creatures met them with weapons drawn, understandably terrified of more strangers arriving after the slavers had attacked. It was Tomas who stepped forward first, his elderly frame moving slowly, his hands empty and raised. "We are friends. We heard you call for help. We came as fast as we could." The translation took a moment to process. Then one of the insectoids, their wings reflecting light in patterns that seemed to indicate emotion, lowered their weapon. "You heard us? But how? We did not know anyone was listening." "Someone is always listening," Rivers said quietly. "And when we hear calls for help, we come. That's what we do." The integration of the new species into galactic society took months. They chose a name that translated roughly to the Saved and asked specifically to join the Guardian program. Their ships began flying alongside human and allied vessels, learning tactics and protocols while contributing their own unique perspectives. Rina, now a senior council diplomat, watched from Unity Watch as another joint fleet departed to answer another distress call. She thought about the terrified junior diplomat she had been, arguing that the council should call the humans despite everyone's fears. She thought about how much had changed in less than a year. Ambassador Wilson joined her at the observation window, his hair grayer than before, but his stance still strong. "Second thoughts? Never," Rina said firmly. "I'm watching the galaxy learn what you tried to tell us from the beginning. That strength isn't about the ability to harm. It's about the choice to protect." Another distress call came through the communication network. Another species in trouble. Another chance to prove that help would come if you called for it. The joint fleet changed course without hesitation, moving toward the coordinates with that same terrible precision that had once frightened the galaxy. They sent a distress call. Humanity answered, and the galaxy, slowly learning what it meant to be protected by those who chose compassion over conquest, answered with them. The Age of Guardians had begun.